as we go through life, and at least I'll speak for myself, I have certain experiences in life that I go through, or I watch others go through, that get me a little fired up. So I spent what seemed like eternity at the Duke ER Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening, and then a couple hours Monday and a couple hours Tuesday. But for those of y'all that weren't here, Sunday afternoon I met a family member at the Duke ER, and there was no room in the inn for her or the other guy and the others that were being carted in because the inn was full. So I learned a phrase that I didn't know before. She was put in a hall bed. A hall bed is where they put you when they don't have a bed in an ER room for you. And that's the storage area until they can clear up an ER room for you. So wouldn't you know, as the circumstance would have it, that it took me a little time to pick up on what was going on. It was about the third gurney that came in that I realized I am sitting right here, and her bed is right here. I'm at the foot of her bed, and here's the corner of the hallway. Now right around this corner is where the doctors and nurses were all having a party, and were cutting up and laughing and having a good time. And over here were two triage rooms where they bring them to right here in front of me, and then they'd wait for the nurse, the triage nurse, to come and then bring them into this room, and then they would examine them to determine what's going on with it and what's the severity of their issue and what they're going to do with it. So I got to sit there for 3+ hours and watch them cart in one person after another down that hallway. So as they came down that hallway and they stopped right in front of me, back down the hallway were the back doors into the ER. And over here I got to watch the triage nurses do their thing. So I had bird's eye view to this operation that was going on. And I got to see people come in that were hurt, that were in pain, that were desolate, that were confused. And different ones have even jumped out in my remembrance since Sunday and even since last night. The very essence of our intention with this ministry is really found in John 10, which is to find and live the abundance of life that Jesus said, I came to give to you. And I was at the gym today and I was thinking about what would be taught tonight, and I knew I'd go to John 9. I actually knew that Sunday morning you said something. I think you were in John 11, and somehow I wound up in 9, and I knew, well, you're going to teach from John 9. I didn't know what, but I knew I'd teach from John 9. So I was at the gym and I remembered sometime in this experience of Sunday afternoon, around the corner were not only the doctors and nurses. Now, they only had a party for a short amount of time. They didn't have anybody to attend to. So it wasn't like they were necessarily shirking their responsibilities, but the bathrooms were also past them. So I must have gone to the bathroom or gone and spoken to that doctor, which I told him about 5 times, this is the last time I'm going to interrupt you. This is the last time I'm going to interrupt you. So I come back, and as I'm about around the corner, I see 2 police officers or security guards or correction officials walk up, and then a girl walking behind them, and then 2 others walking with her. So she came from some type of incarceration, whether it was the back of a police car or a nearby jail or something. Nobody in that group looked happy. As a matter of fact, nobody at the hospital really looked happy, as you can imagine. But I thought about that young lady today, and my assumption was that she had come from a local jail or prison or something. I may have been wrong. But I thought about her, and I thought about the whole procession, because she was right there in the middle, and there was a police officer there, and one there, and one here, and one there. Now, when they rounded the corner, they came down the hall, because I kind of got to the corner as they were 3/4 of the way down. Everybody paid attention. So she was on display because now she's got law enforcement with her. So that's a different entry than anyone else had made. Everyone else that came in down that hall came in on the gurney, followed by ambulance drivers. And I thought about the church because I met a pastor while I was there in the last couple of days. And I thought about the church overall, and I thought about that young lady. And we are the bride of Christ. We are the bride of the Lamb. I just had an intimate moment with the Lord. And if I'm not already married to Him, then I just committed fornication. You know, He asked me, will you marry me? And I said yes. And that gave us legal right for Him to come into me and for us to conceive. When I asked Ginger to marry me, she could have said no. That would have been a shock. And it would have been a bad day. And it would have been quite a defeat. Because when you get down on your knee and you put that hand out and you say, will you marry me? If the answer is no, then that's a bad day. Because you put it out there then. Well, God has put it out there, and He's asked us to marry Him. And I thought about this young lady, and I thought about the whole thing. And then I started thinking about the church. And how the church has put people in bondage by prostituting this name, Jesus Christ. And she came in surrounded by the law. There were others there, actually. There were 4 around her. 2 or 3 showed up from somewhere. I'm sure it was hospital security that showed up, so they were everywhere. I didn't think they were there for me, so I was pretty much relaxed and just watching the scene. It was just another person that came in. But I thought about her today and her life, symptomatic of the church and where the church is overall and what the church has done to God's people in putting them in bondage and stealing their life. They do not know, I fully believe they do not know the abundance of life that Jesus has brought to all of us. So, Sister Kelly, I probably will need you to write. We're going to go to John 9. First thing I want you to come up here and write, actually, I think I have 10 bullet points, so we're going to have to work together and be succinct. So let's put as number 1 that we need to, and again, you're right out of 10 of them, so expect abundant life. So Holy Ghost, help me express this like you showed it to me. All right. I'll call you back. Well, you can hang up there for a moment. So, why should we expect abundant life?
It was promised.
It was promised.
We belong to Him.
We belong to Him.
And His word is a bond.
His word is a bond. It's a covenant.
Covenant.
He cannot fail.
Cannot break.
He's the faithful and the true. So the first thing we've got to realize is we should expect abundant life. Period. We should expect it. Now, I went through life and I didn't necessarily expect abundant life. I was just going through life and just living day by day and living an average life. But see, He's not an average God. He didn't live an average life. We're going to see that He didn't live an average life. He was extraordinary. He was super ordinary. And we're going to study that in John 9. Let's go to John 9, verse 1. Jack, you got your Bible? All right. Probably get you to read with me a little bit, son, when we get to a certain point. As Jesus passed by, He saw a man which was blind from his birth. And His disciples asked Him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? So the first thing that we see here is Jesus, as He passed by, there's a blind man. He saw this man which was blind from his birth. And His disciples asked Him, what did they ask Him? What's the first thing on their minds?
What kind of sin did He do?
The first thing that came to their mind was what?
Sin.
Sin. Was judgment.
Yes.
See, they still don't have the Holy Ghost. They're walking with the Comforter, but they have not become the Comforter. So they are walking in judgment. Now, judgment under the new covenant, under the New Testament, is the conviction of the Holy Ghost. It's not the condemnation of the law. So the first thing that comes to their mind is what?
Damnation.
Who did this? Damnation. Who was wrong in this situation? I sat there and I watched person after person be brought in there. And I even said this last night. Some of those people probably did things that caused them to be there that day. Some of them may not have done anything that caused them to be there that day. And that kept going on through my mind Sunday and even forward. And I knew I would be teaching from John 9, and then I saw this, and I'm like, that's exactly what I experienced on Sunday. For me, there was no condemnation, there was no judgment of these people. But I had a parade of people coming across me. The first things that these guys have on their mind is who sinned. Now, we're going to walk through this. Sister, if you would write up here, number 2 is examine life. Okay? So what do we learn from these guys here? Because we're going to study this further and you'll see it laid out. But there are a couple of things that jump out of these 2 scriptures to me. And this is going to make sense as we go through here, because everything we're trying to teach and preach right now to build upon what Pastor did, he did the same thing. But we're trying to take this message that we have and apply it to our lives so we can build our own lives and live a life of abundance. So, first of all, what we have to realize is we have to be able to see and we have to be able to hear. Jesus saw this man. He saw his need. And he always, you can study other scriptures, he always heard from the Father because he spent time in the presence of the Father. So one thing that we need to do is we need to be able to see and hear. I pray on a continuous basis, consistent basis for myself, Lord, open my eyes and open my ears to the things that I do not see and don't hear yet, because I know they're there and I want to experience those so that I can live an abundance of life and I can bring that to my wife, to my children, and everybody that I encounter. Now, we will study on through this, but these guys asked this question, who did sin? This man or his parents, that he was born blind? Did they ask the right question? No. First thing they did is they asked the wrong question. Right off the bat, they asked the wrong question. So what we have to do with our life is we have to examine our own life in order to grow and in order to ascend. We just have to look at our own lives. We have to be able to see and hear, and we have to ask the right questions in order to grow. All right, let's read on. Jesus answered. Jack, why don't you read what he answered? Read verse 3 and 4 for us.
Jesus answered, neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me, while it is day, the night cometh, when no man can work.
Okay, go ahead and read 5.
As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world.
Okay? So Jesus is focused on what he's doing. He's focused on his mission. And when he answered these guys, he didn't even really answer their question, because he usually didn't. Because he thought higher and he acted higher. So he would answer in parables to teach and to learn, or to hammer the Pharisees, or to just confuse those that were around him. So he answers with this. What did he say? Nobody sinned. This is what's going on. I must work the works of the Father that sent me while I can do the work that the Father sent me. He was about his task. So as we examine our own lives, what we have to do, we have to look at areas of our life that need improvement or that we need to dismiss altogether. I see people focus, especially in the workplace, on things that they didn't even need to be bothered with. Because for whatever reason, it wasn't going to be fruitful, wasn't their job, whatever. But we have to look at our own lives and see, what areas do I need to improve? And what areas am I focused on that right now I might need to dismiss? Because it all comes down to focus. What are we focused on every day? Today is March 20th, correct? Today is the 20th, 2019. We'll never live this day again. So tomorrow's going to be the 21st. What will we focus on tomorrow? will it lead to an abundance of life? Or will we get, I'm about to get ahead of myself, or will we get caught up in confusion and clutter and chaos? When I was at that ER the other night, there was a lot of clutter and chaos and confusion because you're dealing with people's lives. So that's another thing that we need to do, sister. We need to put number 3 up here. And we will write that as, just put up focus. You're doing a great job. Thank you. Jack, go ahead and read verse 6 for us.
When he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind men with the clay.
Okay, so Jesus has just answered their question, and he has just told them, really, I'm about my Father's business. What does he do next? What do you see in verse 6? What did he do? He took action. He did an inventory of his resources. So write that up next, sister, please. An inventory of his resources. He looked down at the ground and he saw dust. We've talked about dust recently. He saw dust. And what did he do with that dust? He spit on it. And it made clay. Okay? Let's go a little bit deeper spiritually. That's what Jesus did. He took the dust man, the Adam, and he went to the cross and he gave up his life so that we could be resurrected. Jesus took his resources, that dust, he took what was inside of him and he spit on it, and then he used that. He first, though, he did an inventory. I can imagine when he looked down, when he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground. So he looked down, looked at what he saw, he spit on it, and then he took it to use. That was his resource. Verse 7 says, and he said unto him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is by interpretation sin. He went his way therefore and washed and came seeing. So not only did he see and know what resources he had, but he utilized his resources. See, that's what we have to do. We have to realize what our resources are. The first thing we have to realize is that we are his, that we belong to him, that we can, that we are capable, that we have the ability, that we have the knowledge, that we have the authority, the power, all the natural and the supernatural things that we need. God has placed inside of us, and his name is Christ. That's what is inside of us. So we have to walk in confidence, not cockiness and arrogance, but confidence that we can fulfill the vision that God has given us for our life. Okay? Jack, I'm going to have you read a little bit longer. Sister, if you would put number 5. Put utilize resources. Now when Jesus did this, Jack, you're about to read starting in 8, but when Jesus did this, he didn't just utilize his resources. He had an expectation of success. So he had confidence in what he was about to do. He had no doubt in what he was going to do. He had the vision, he knew his resources, and he was going to enact those resources, and he was going to do what? Change this man's life. He was going to change this man's life. He had authority over the atmosphere. He had authority over his atmosphere. See, we have to take authority over our atmosphere. This thing right here. We have to have authority over this. You see, nobody did this for Jesus. He was the leader. See, we living in him and him in us, him working with us, we're the leader of our life. We should expect abundant life. We should examine our life. We should focus, do an inventory of our resources, then utilize those resources with the expectation to succeed. So we have people that have been beat down throughout life in this place. Just like in the world, just like in that ER. We've got to overcome that. But these are keys to overcoming that. And every one of us has been beat down in one way or another by that. Nobody has been immune from that. But we have to dig down deep inside of ourselves. And we have to overcome whatever's hindering us. Jack, go ahead and read for us, son.
The neighbors, therefore, when they which before had seen him that he was blind, said, Is not this he that sat and begged?
Now look, now other people are coming to the party. So other people are standing there. Jesus with his disciples and with this man, and they're onlookers. Now they're throwing their mouths into it. Okay, we'll come back to that in just a moment. So keep reading, Jack.
Someone said, This is he. Others said, It's like him. But he said, I am he.
Okay, stop right there. Some said this is he. Others said he is like him. But then what did he say? He said, no, I am. I am he. So what's going on in this little cul-de-sac that these people are living on right here?
They're yelling.
All different voices. And what are they doing? They're all confused, except the guy that just got healed. See, his eyes have been opened and he says, I am he. But all these other people, they don't have a clue who this guy is. They're just flapping their gums and running their mouths. They're not speaking truth. They are not speaking truth. So what they are speaking has the potential to cause confusion and to cause chaos. Now, I'm growing to like this guy even more as we're talking about him now. It's one thing, I kind of liked him when I was studying this tonight and last night, but I'm starting to like this guy even more. And I think by the end of this, he might be another hero. So go ahead, Jack, and keep reading.
Therefore said they unto him, How were thine eyes opened? He answered and said, A man that is called Jesus made clay, and anointed mine eyes, and said unto me, Go to the pool of Siloam, and wash. And I went and washed, and I received sight.
So this guy is working through the clutter, and he's working through these people's voices, and they're asking him questions. And what did he do? He just recited the instructions that he was given and the results to his life that came from that. Now, the first thing for this guy, let's call him, no, we can't do that. Let's call him George. I always use George. I don't know. I like George. So let's call him George. Okay? So first of all, George is sitting there, he's minding his own business when the answer to his problem comes by. And the answer sees him, and the answer opens up his eyes. Now, George has got his neighbors who were already clowns, but they're living in the cul-de-sac, and now the neighbors are running their mouths, and they're just trying to cause confusion and clutter. But George tells him exactly what happened. Now, the first thing, George had to be able to hear Jesus before he could see him. How do you know that? Look at what he just told him. He answered and said, A man that is called Jesus made clay and anointed mine eyes, and said unto me, Go to the pool of Siloam and wash. I went and washed, and I received my sight. Now, it doesn't say anywhere that Jesus opened that man's ears. That man could already hear. His ears had already been opened. He just couldn't see. So, you know he heard the conversation, likely, that Jesus was having with the disciples before we even got to this point, where his eyes were healed. So he just told them what happened step by step. So he was paying attention. This changed his life. Changed his life. And immediately, confusion tried to come in through the voices of other people. Go ahead, son.
Then said they unto him, Where is he? Or where is he? He said, I know not.
So that tells me Jesus is no longer in there. He has left the vicinity and he has moved on. So now this man is there, and we're going to find out he's dealing with more people. Now he's dealing with the neighbors so far, correct? If I missed anybody, it's just the neighbors so far. Okay? Go ahead, Jack, because we're about to add more people to the story.
They brought to the Pharisees him that aforetime was blind.
So now these people aren't satisfied with this. So it's not enough that they can't bring him down with their questions and their confusion. Now they're going to take him to the law. Now they're going to take him to the religious, to the scholars. Now they're going to do what? They're going to bring up scripture and try to debate. They're going to try to confuse him. They're going to try to use the name of God. They're going to try to take from him what God gave to him, which was his birthright and his inheritance. They bring him to the big dogs. They bring him to the leaders, to the highly esteemed, to the ones with the big chairs and the big crowns and the pope hats. They're going to bring him before them because you know what? They couldn't bring him down. Well, let's take him to our religious leaders and let them, the big men, let's let them bring him down. So let's see what happens to my hero George here. Go ahead, Jack.
And it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Then again the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He said unto them, He put clay upon mine eyes, and I wash, and do see.
So look at what Jesus did. Now, we have scholars in this room. Brother Joshua said it once at least, if not more. We all have revelation of the Word in this place. We've been here long enough, and we should be applying this Word to our lives, and we should be living in abundance of life, but that's a process. We all have revelation of this Word. So we all know, I think, that Jesus did things on the Sabbath, and they said it was unlawful. This wasn't the first time, and it wasn't the last. He was a bad dude. Josie Wales, I said it before, Josie Wales had nothing on him. He was a bad dude. Why? He was not going to let their religious beliefs, their traditions, keep him from changing this man's life. He knew what he was doing. He knew it was the Sabbath. But now he's gone. He's left the scene. But guess what? This guy's gained strength from what has happened and from his encounter with Jesus. Now he's going before the head knockers, the leaders, right? Now what are they doing?
They're trying to bring him down.
Then begin the Pharisees asking, how did you receive your sight? So they're asking the same questions. I sat in that ER Sunday night, and 3 doctors came in at different times and were asking for the rundown of the scenario that led to us being there. So I got to listen in very much detail the last week of my family member's life and all that they had gone through. And they were dealing with something not very pleasant. By the time the 3rd doctor got finished asking questions, and he asked a lot more questions, the same detail, and a lot more of them, I laughed and I said, Doc? He said, what? I said, I'm not hungry for dinner anymore. This guy's kind of going through the same thing. What's happening, man? This guy has just encountered truth that has set him free, that has changed his life. And if he is not strong in his mind and in his heart and in his soul, these questions will take him out of that experience that he just had in his life. So far, their voices have not hindered him and have not stopped his resolve. Go ahead and keep reading, son.
Therefore said some of the Pharisees, This man is not of God, because he keepeth not the Sabbath day, or he keepeth not the Sabbath day. Others said, How can a man that is a sinner do such miracles? And there was a division among them.
So what's going on here is the Baptists and the Methodists and the Catholics and the non-denominationals and the AME and all the other denominations, they're all there together and they're arguing exactly what happened and who was wrong and what's going on. And there was a division among them. See, we all know all that stuff. But we can't have a division among us. There cannot be a division up here or separate us from God. That's why we have to take on the mind of Christ daily. Okay? Keep reading, son.
They say unto the blind man again, What sayest thou of him that he hath opened thine eyes? He said, He is a prophet.
So not only they've been asking him what happened, but now they're making it more personal. Well, what do you think of this guy that did this? Who do you think he is? What do you think he is? So what answer does he give? He gives the only answer that he knows at that point, because you got to remember, Jesus had not been to the cross. These guys are still under the old covenant, under the Old Testament. They don't realize the fulfillment of the law is standing right in front of them. Right in front of him, he's performing miracles. They don't know that, so what does he do? He says, well, he's a prophet. Because they knew the stories of Elijah and Elisha and other prophets that performed miracles. So he says, well, he's a prophet. Because he is still, even though he just encountered Jesus and that has changed his life and strengthened him, his mindset is still only the understanding that he has of what he was taught growing up in the synagogue. Because we're going to see in a little while, we know he was in the synagogue. There's no doubt that he was in the synagogue. But Jesus came along and changed his life. Go ahead, Jack.
But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight until they called the parents of him that had received the sight.
Oh, now we're going to go after him even more. We're going to bring in the parents. It's not enough, the neighbor's question. It's not enough that the Pharisees couldn't bring him down. Now, we're not getting our answers. We can't keep you in this box. Now we're going to bring in the parents. See, we're going to use a different tact to go after you. We're going to put a different thought in your head to tell you that you can't do what God said you could do. See, that's what we have to guard against. We have to guard against these things from stealing our life. From stealing our life. Go ahead, son.
And they asked him, saying, Is this your son, who ye say was born blind? How then doth he now see? And they asked him, saying, His parents answered them and said, We know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But by what means he now seeth, we know not, or who hath opened his eyes. We know not. He is of age. Ask him, he shall speak for himself.
Okay, stop right there. So the parents are just answering what they know. We know that he was born blind. But see, they're being confronted. And I'm going to have you read verses 22 and 23, but now they're being confronted. And what did Adam and Eve just do? We know he was born blind. Why don't you ask him? Now, you got to be kidding me. Actually, read 22 and 23 before we get to kidding. Read that.
These words spake his parents, because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had agreed already that if any man did confess that he was Christ, he should be put out of the synagogue. Therefore said his parents, He is of age, ask him.
They were afraid of getting kicked out of the church if they acknowledged that Jesus had performed a miracle and changed their son's life. They did not have the strength and the courage to stand up to those that were lying to them and that were keeping them in bondage. Those thoughts, those old thoughts that we have carried with us, we have to cast them aside because they will keep us in bondage and will steal our freedom from us and will keep us from living this abundance of life. Yes, sir.
They were terrified to tell the truth, because they know the consequences could have been if they spoke out for themselves and so let the son speak.
What were the consequences?
Well, it could be death.
Nope. It's not what it says. The consequences were they wouldn't be able to go to church on Sunday. They wouldn't be able to go to, now we don't know, maybe they'd have taken them out and stoned them, but that's not what this says. They would not have been able to continue to go to church. I'll tell you what it was pride. We can't go to church anymore, we're going to be embarrassed. Even though our boy just got a miracle that changed his life. So you just opened up something, Brother Tommy, that I didn't see. It was pride. They wanted to carry on in their old ways. They didn't want to be shunned. They didn't want to not get invited to Sunday lunch anymore. They wanted to hold on to their old life, their old ways, and live in that box. So sister number 6 is this. We're going to have to really be creative with this one because I got a lot of notes here. All right? Yeah. Steadfast and creative. Here's what we've got in verses 8 through 23. What did George do? Jorge, for our Latin friends. He ignored the confusion and the clutter and the chaos that came from the Pharisees and the neighbors as they continued to hammer him and hit him and ask him, what happened? What happened? What happened? He ignored that clutter and he worked his way through it. He did not let that stop him. What did he show us? He was steadfast and he was resolute. His story never changed, ever, because he knew the story that he was sharing was true. He knew that this had changed his life. He knew that it was true. So he was steadfast and he was resolute. What did he do that his parents didn't do, or his neighbors didn't do? He told the truth, but also now he's thinking outside of the box. So he's being creative. You're going to launch your business. You should not do it like anybody else. And you won't do it like anybody else. It's your business. Think outside of the box. Think creative. He thought, now he's thinking outside of the box. He's not thinking like the rest of these people. Because if he thinks like the rest of them, living in this little cul-de-sac that they live in, he eventually is going to live in a little cul-de-sac himself. And he's going to live an average life. And he's going to die an average person and not have an abundance of life. So he's thinking outside of the box. And at the end of this, even when his parents were afraid, he didn't have fear. He wasn't afraid. As a matter of fact, that box that they wanted to go to every week, that synagogue, I'm sure he had no interest in that anymore whatsoever. Because chains and shackles had been taken off of him. And now he knows, I've got a better life. I've got a greater life. I can see. Can you imagine? Since birth, and we don't know his age, but let's say he's 30. Since birth, he can't see, and now he can see everything around him. There's no way they're going to hold him in a box anymore. No way they're going to hold him in a box anymore. Let's read on there, Mr. Jack. Read 24 through 34. You know I'll probably read.
And again called they the man that was blind, and said unto him, Give God the praise.
No. 24. Well, I'm in John 10. That's not 10:24. Yeah, go ahead.
Then again called they the man
Yep.
that was blind, and said unto him, Give God the praise, and know that this man is a sinner. He answered and said, Whether he be a sinner or no, I know not. One thing I know, that whereas I was blind, now I see. Then said they to him again, What did he to thee? How opened he thine eyes? He answered them, I have told you already, and ye did not hear. Wherefore would ye hear it again? Will ye also be his disciples? Then they reviled him, and said, Thou art his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples.
So what did he just tell them? He said, if I tell you this story for the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th time, is it going to change your mind? See, he's not backing down. See, when you know that you know that you know that you've got a vision for your life, you know it's from God, you know there's fruit in that vision already, nobody's going to back you down. So he's standing up to these people that not only are they questioning him, but now they're questioning the man that did this. They're questioning God. And what's he doing? He's standing up to them. See, we have to stand up to those thoughts and those doubts. We have to stand up to those giants in our life that would keep us from getting out of the box, that would keep us from living in abundance of life. We have to stand up to those. There has to be something to rise up inside of us to say, no, I am not going to let this defeat me. I am not going to let this take abundance from my life, let alone take my life. It has to rise up inside of us, that fight and that diligence and that tenacity. That we are going to live this abundant life. We will fight through the voices. The worst voices are these that we hear here. But there are seeds planted by others. I was back there studying, my phone rang, and it's a buddy of mine I've known for years. And he always calls when I can't talk to him. I've probably got 1 or 2 voicemails now that he's left me in the last 3 weeks. I just haven't had time. And I thought, well, I'm going to answer it real quick. Well, there's no real quick with him. There never has been in 25 years. And I told him right away, I said, look, I'm studying to teach at church. Well, that doesn't, there's just no real quick. He said, I got to tell you a funny story. So he told me 3 funny stories. And one of them he told me, I'm like, oh my God, people are crazy. But see, I shouldn't have answered at that time because I didn't need to hear that funny story. Because it gave me a visual. And guess what happened? In the last song during praise and worship, that thing started trying to come back. And I started rising up inside of myself going, no, that thought's not going to come here. How am I going to overcome it? This is the second time this has happened in the last 3 weeks during praise and worship. Instead of basking in His glory, I started singing the song. I started singing the song, and then that thought went away, and there was no thought. There was just God. Now, lesson learned. Don't answer the phone before church when Percy calls. Maybe I'll tell him to watch this, and he'll know that he's on camera. It's not his real name. It's just the nickname I gave him years ago. We have to be careful of the voices that we entertain and the thoughts that we have, because they will steal our life from us. There has to be a courage to stand up and move forward, to live this life, and to live it in abundance. None of those people in that hospital were living in abundance of life. Not a one. Now, I have some stories that will probably stick with me for a while, some things that I heard, but things that I saw. Beautiful young lady, probably 16 or 17, that I overheard the nurse later, because I was sitting right around the corner for 3 hours. And she came out of the examining triage room and was on the phone. And all that I heard was, well, she said she didn't want to live anymore. And she had a plan to take her life. And I just sat there and I just put my head down and I started praying for that girl. Beautiful girl. Had to be 16 or 17. See, something she either did have a plan or it was a cry for help. By the way, her mom brought her in. I didn't see a dad. Doesn't mean he's not around. But there are a lot of dads that aren't around. See, we have what it takes inside of us to save their lives. We have to get over ourselves first. Title was right. I don't know how many times I've been in a funk and been in a bad place over my 15 years here. Not so much lately, but those first dozen especially. And I knew going through life that I'd walked past people and I could have impacted in some way. Even just to smile and say hello. But instead I was caught up in myself and my own hurt and frustrations of life. Selfishness and pride, because it really comes down to pride. See, I guarantee you this guy, George, was walking in humility after this, but he also was walking in confidence and courage. Nobody's going to tell him that what happened in his life hadn't happened. Nobody was going to tell him. Okay, go ahead, brother.
We know that God spake unto Moses as for this fellow, we know not from whence he is. The man answered and said unto them, Why, herein is a marvelous thing, that ye know not from whence he is, and yet he hath opened mine eyes. Now we know that God heareth not sinners, but if any man be a worshipper of God, and doeth his will, if he heareth. Since the world began, was it not heard that any man opened the eyes of one that was born blind? If this man were not of God, he could do nothing. They answered and said unto him, Thou wast altogether born in sins, and dost thou teach us? And they cast him out.
So not only have his eyes been opened, not only has he gained confidence and strength and courage, but he's found his voice. So now he's speaking truth. He's speaking truth to these guys. He's not being backed down by the religious leadership. He's not backing down. He is telling them the truth of what happened, even in the face of their traditions, of their past, because they're really living in the past and they're perpetuating the past. That's what they're doing. That's what the parents didn't want to come out of. They didn't want to come out of the past. Because actually the son is there. He could have brought him into a different future. But if all they care about is going to the synagogue every Sunday night and Wednesday night, if that's all, see, it's not enough to keep going. There's got to be a change. There's got to be an impact. There's got to be growth. Even if it's incremental, there's got to be growth. So, sister, the next one to write up here. Right people speak in life. These guys at this point, they have no right to speak in his life. None. Right people speak in life. We have to guard our garden from who we allow to speak into our life. We have to guard our garden from the thoughts that we allow to lead us down this path of life. These guys do not have a right to speak in his life. Why do I say that? Because what they're speaking is desolation and destruction. So they don't have a right anymore. Jesus has freed him, so they don't have a right anymore. And that's true for us too. We need to take in life, and life more abundantly, so that we have life to give, and life more abundantly. Okay, Jack, go ahead. 335 for us, please.
Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, he said unto him, Dost thou believe on the Son of God?
Now, Jesus heard that they had cast him out. Jesus was hanging out in the nearby Starbucks. He knew what was going to happen. He was just letting it take place. And now he comes back to the guy. After the guy has gone down this path. Jesus was never very far. And what did he say? Do you believe on the Son of God? He answered and said, Who is he, Lord, that I might believe on him? He still thinks he's a prophet. And Jesus said to him, Thou hast both seen him once I opened your eyes. And it is he that talketh with thee. Not only can you see me, but you can hear me. I am that Son of God that came and I've set you free. Jesus said, You see me, and you're talking to me. And he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. Sister, right up here, number 8 is go where you are celebrated. We've heard pastors say it more than once, go where you're celebrated, not tolerated. Let me put that in a slightly different perspective. Same thing, but as we go through our daily life, if there is a situation that is bringing strife onto us, we need to really examine that situation and see if we need to continue to entertain such thoughts and conversations. Now, we also need to look in the mirror and see if we're the ones that are bringing the strife. But if we're butting our heads up against the same old wall over and over and over, we need to examine our life and find out, is this the focus that I'm supposed to have in my life? Or should I refocus? Should I move, change that just a little bit? Because this is the only life that we have. And it is a process. Lord, I believe that he worshiped him. Next on our whiteboard is this. Got 2 more. Be grateful and be thankful. No, ma'am. That's just no. We're going to blue marker, don't we? Be grateful and thankful in all things. I've heard somebody say that, and I've heard them say it a number of times. And there were times in my busy days when it would just start to come in on me, and I'd hear that voice say, always be grateful. And I'd stop. And I'd stop what I was doing. And I'd just start thanking the Lord. And then when I started thanking Him for the first thing that came to mind, then other things would come to mind. And pretty soon I was back on course. And Jesus said, for judgment I came into this world, that they which see not might see, and that they which see might be made blind. And some of the Pharisees which were with him heard these words and said unto him, are we blind also? And Jesus said unto them, if you were blind, ye should have no sin. But now ye say, we see, therefore your sin remaineth. He knew they were sinners because they were bringing unbelief to these people, and they were keeping them in bondage. See, that's the greatest sin, which is the unbelief. That's the sin under the law of the Spirit. Jesus never backed down to these guys. He never backed down to a fight. He was sent as the sheriff to free people from bondage. We need to have confidence in that in our own lives, in every aspect of our life, that is why He came, to free us from all bondage, so that we can be free and live a beautiful and a fruitful life. The more free we are, the more we have to give to other people. The more free we are, the more we can bring healing and deliverance. The more free we are, the more we can bring words to them that will change their lives and bring comfort to them, because they're words of the Holy Spirit. The last one that we'll put down here is wash, rinse, and repeat. This is not a one-time thing. This is working out your own salvation with much fear and trembling. Other thing I outline is learn and ascend. So we do this over and over. We expect abundant life every day that we get up. We examine our life. We focus. What are our resources? We use our resources. We're creative and steadfast and resolute. We don't allow the wrong voices to speak into our lives. And we don't muddle through life in strife. And we're thankful for life. And we repeat that over and over and over. And as we learn more of the knowledge of God, then we ascend in this life and fully have the full measure of His abundance of life. And that's all I have.